At that moment, the owner of the guest house closed his eyes tightly. No one here had seen Pyowool longer than him. So he knew better than anyone how scary he could be. It was clear in his eyes what was going to happen now. And his prediction became a reality. Sight. A terrifying pounding sound echoed through the guest house. Huh. The Iron Dwarf jerked his head back in surprise at the sudden sound. Suddenly, something sharp ripped through his arm. If he had been a little late to dodge, his forehead would have been pierced. What? The Iron Dwarf stared at the man he had cursed a while ago. Sight. At that moment, another sharp piercing sound came from the back of his head. The Iron Dwarf, who thought he had avoided danger, was shocked, and he hurriedly fell flat on the floor. Cook! Something passed through his back. Fortunately for him, he avoided it in time, so only his clothes and skin were torn, but if he had reacted a little late, his spine would have been severed. You! The Iron Dwarf hurriedly got up and looked at the man who was more beautiful than the woman. There was a small dagger in his hands. The Iron Dwarf instinctively realized that the dagger in the man's hand was the weapon that wounded his body. The Iron Dwarf released the chain on his waist. The iron ball hanging from the end of the chain rattled. Crazy bastard! Attacking me all of a sudden? Who are you? I don't think that's something that a person who cursed first should say. The man who was sitting in his seat, Pyowool, stood up and said. Suddenly, a faint red light appeared in his eyes. Pyowool was the type of person who didn't start a fight, but would not hesitate to fight back if needed. Pyowool knew how unrealistic his appearance was. So he knew that many people would look at him with unkind eyes. In particular, the less confident they were in their appearance, the more they were to show off and attack. He wondered what would happen if such people were alone. Huang. The Iron Dwarf swung the chain in circles and said, Do you know who I am? Your sense of inferiority is talking too much. It seems that there's a problem with your mind, rather than your body. This bastard. The Iron Dwarf's anger exploded. He swung the chain back and forth. Pobobok. The iron ball attached at the end of the chain flew towards Pyowool, destroying the objects in the guest house in the process. Oh, my. The owner of the guest house closed his eyes tightly and fell to the floor. It was because he couldn't bear to watch his break down anymore. But he didn't hear the sound he had imagined. Chweraruk. It was because Pyowool's hand was holding the chain. Huh. When the chain failed to show any power and was caught in Pyowool's hand, the Iron Dwarf was freaked out. At that moment, Pyowool pulled the iron ball sharply. Then, the Iron Dwarf who was attached to the chain bounced out of the window. Then, Pyowool flew away. You son of a... The Iron Dwarf who had been thrown on the floor jumped up. His anger has reached its climax. The Iron Dwarf injected his internal chi and swung the chain. Kwa. The iron ball flew toward Pyowool with a tremendous momentum that could not be compared with before. The Heaven's Iron Ball. 1. It was the name of the martial artist he had learned. Heaven's Iron Ball was literally the ultimate martial art of crushing even the sky with an iron ball. The iron ball, loaded with inner strength, had the power to turn even a rock the size of a house into powder at once. Go to hell! The Iron Dwarf angrily roared. That was then. Pyowool's body seemed to float in the air like a kite filled with the wind. And then he jumped on the iron ball that flew at frightening speed. HCK. He was so surprised that he felt like his heart was about to drop. Until now, he had crushed and killed many enemies with his steel ball, but this has never happened before. Tada that. Pyowool kicked the iron ball and sprinted up the chain. In a brief moment when he could barely take a breath, Pyowool reached the front of the Iron Dwarf. The eyes of Pyowool and Iron Dwarf met midair. In an instant, the Iron Dwarf's face turned white. It was because the moment he looked at Pyowool's eyes, which had no emotion, he felt a pain as if he was poked in the eyes with an awl. Puk. At that moment, the dagger Pyowool was holding was deeply embedded into the shoulder of the Iron Dwarf. Cook! The Iron Dwarf tried to pull out the dagger in a hurry. But before he could, Pyowool waved his hand, then the body of the Iron Dwarf flew through the air. He threw the Iron Dwarf using the soul-reaping thread. Pyowool once again waved his hand toward the dagger floating in the air. Pipapit. The ghost knives were released one after the other. Shit. The Iron Dwarf hurriedly tried to protect his whole body by desperately releasing his technique, the Heaven's Iron Ball. However, it was impossible in the first place to perfectly unfold a technique at a high level while in the air where there was no place for their foot to step on. Eventually, a gap was revealed, and a phantom dagger was stuck like a viper. Pobobok. Hyuk! The Iron Dwarf screamed as he fell. Pyowool was about to throw another ghost dagger to finish off when, put that dagger in your hand. Stop. Iron Dwarf. Different voices rang out, and 6 people immediately surrounded the Iron Dwarf. One person held the falling Iron Dwarf, while the other 5 each wielded their own weapons and struck down the ghost dagger. The oldest among them looked at the appearance of the Iron Dwarf. He got angry and said, "I don't know what happened between the two of you, but you, young man, your hands are too much." An elderly person with impressive eyes and eyebrows raised to the sky was Sa-Hyokyung, the leader of the 7 stars. His martial arts was so strong that he was nicknamed the Storm Fire Dragon. 2. Those who appeared with Sa-Hyokyung were the rest of the members of the 7 stars. Jong Sanwi, the Poison-Bellied Sword. 3. Jae-Woong Pyong, the Reckless Shadow. 4. Yo Suliong, the Bloody Witch. 5. Gamil-Hae, the Bamboo Leaf Swordsman. 6. Cho Samcheek, the Mad Blood-Spraying Swordsman. 7. Each and every one of them are masters, considered at the top of Jeonghu. All of them were currently glaring at Pyowool while protecting the Iron Dwarf. Pyowool flicked his hand. Immediately, all the ghost daggers that were either stuck in Iron Dwarf's body or were lying on the floor were recovered. Sa-Hyokyung was quite surprised. They didn't see Pyowool holding anything. Then his expression darkened. While he might not know the identity of the opponent, he knew that he was a master who could not be ignored. Above all, the opponent instantly neutralized and subdued his junior brother, Iron Dwarf. A person with that level of prowess should not be looked down upon. Reveal your identity. Why did you attack my junior brother? Attacking my junior brother is an attack on the entire 7 stars. I will never forgive you unless you have a good reason. Sa-Hyokyung's voice echoed through the streets. People on the street buzzed in surprise. They weren't familiar with the name of the 7 stars, but Sa-Hyokyung's spirit was so fierce that they thought they came from a great sect. In fact, the 7 stars had a great reputation in the vicinity of Hunan. All of the 7 martial artists were so great that there were some sects who gave way just by hearing the name of the 7 stars. Sa-Hyokyung did not think it would have such an effect in Sichuan, which is far from Hunan. However, he expected the opponent to feel some pressure. However, the effect he expected did not appear. So you're with the hunchback, right? The bright red light in Pyowool's eyes grew deeper. Sa-Hyokyung realized that his actions only had the opposite effect. Many of Jeonghu's warriors showed respect for the name of the 7 stars, but it didn't work at all for this beautiful man in front of him. Either he willingly ignores the 7 stars itself, or he has never even heard of the name of the 7 stars. Sa-Hyokyung thought it would be the latter. If the opponent had only stayed in Sichuan for a long time, it was understandable that he did not know the name of the 7 stars. At that time, a woman in her early to mid-30s who was examining the appearance of the Iron Dwarf came forward to Sa-Hyokyung. "Stop it, Oriboni." "What do you mean by stop? Don't you realize? That Iron Dwarf was the first one to cause a riot and this mess happened. He must have acted arbitrarily again and brought that man's anger." That. Sa-Hyokyung stuttered. He, too, thought that the Iron Dwarf would have been the first to pick a fight. But even so, when the Iron Dwarf was hit like that, they could not just act like nothing had happened. The woman glared at Seo-hyuk. If another woman had acted like that, Seo-hyuk would never have let it go. He was a very authoritative person. Neither men nor women would ever be allowed to challenge his authority. However, the story is different if the opponent is Yo Suleong, the Bloody Witch. She was the fifth member and the only woman of the Seven Stars. Not only Seo-hyuk, but all the men in Seven Stars loved her. The reason why the Iron Dwarf tried to buy accessories at the market and made a fuss to get a room at the guest house was all to show off in front of Yo Suleong. The Iron Dwarf was highly devoted to Yo Suleong, but Yo Suleong didn't like his behavior. No, it would be more appropriate to say that she actually hated it. She didn't like the fact that the Iron Dwarf was showing his love towards her. She was tired of feeling his eyes on her skin. She hated it all the more because he caused an incident like this. Although she was given the eerie nickname of the Bloody Witch, Yo Suleong was actually a recognizable beauty. What made her bewitching face even more accentuated was her curvaceous body. The appearance of her wearing a tight-fitting outfit to reveal her body was enough to attract men on the street. Yo Suleong looked at Pyeowul with her eyes slightly raised. For a moment, her eyes fluttered. What kind of man? Pyeowul's beautiful appearance shook her heart. Comparing the warriors of the Seven Stars to Pyeowul, they all look like a dried-up octopus. Yo Suleong said with a bewitching smile, "I'm sorry for the trouble caused by the Iron Dwarf. I apologize on his behalf. I'm Yo Suleong of the Seven Stars. Everyone calls me the Bloody Witch. Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm not called that way because I'm a bad person. What is the name of this young sir?" Pyeowul. That's a cool name as much as your appearance. Anyway, since our Iron Dwarf was the one at fault, we apologize. We'd also like to step back for today. Of course, we will compensate for all the damage he caused. This is a pretty good offer for you too, isn't it? Yo Suleong's words were polite and persuasive. Pyeowul nodded his head without saying a word. Epsilon. If he decides to fight, he can fight as much as he wants. But in that case, the town of Chengdu, which has barely regained stability, will be destroyed again. No matter how much Pyeowul doesn't care about other people, he didn't want to repeat that situation twice. Pyeowul went back into the guest house. Then Seo-hyuk asked Yo Suleong, "What do you think? Are you also fascinated by that pretty guy's face?" "Ho ho. Why? Can't I do that?" "Hyung. Don't worry, Orboni. It's not like that. There's just something that bothers me." "What?" "It's Chengdu's atmosphere." "Why?" "It's strangely stagnant. There are sects in Chengdu, and it's a place where the influence of the Amei and Qingqing sect is strong, but I don't feel that kind of atmosphere." Come to think of it. Seo-hyuk agreed with Yo Suleong. While the Seven Stars is famous in the vicinity of Hunan, in Sichuan they have no choice but to be careful. This is because they are far from their territory, and powerful sects such as the Qingqing and Amei sect are in charge. Because of that, when they entered the city, they were very nervous and wary. However, the atmosphere inside Chengdu was completely different from what they had imagined. The warriors and disciples of the Qingqing and Amei sect were nowhere to be found, and the members of the other sects could hardly be found. It is as if the number of warriors in Chengdu have thinned out. Yo Suleong looked around the streets of Chengdu with cool eyes and said, "Something must have definitely happened here. We can't rush into a conflict until we know the truth."